Hey guys, Deeble here. Today we're going to be going over Armor View, what it is, what sort of information you can get out of it. This is a feature that was just recently added, just on the last update about a week ago, if you're watching this video when it's new. It's a feature that myself and many others have been asking about really, I don't know, since launch or shortly thereafter. It's an important feature to understand. Number one, how do we defend ourselves with a given ship using the armor? How effective can we use the armor? And number two, we can look at our ship's guns and see what sort of how effective those guns are going to be against other targets. So I'm going to be going over a couple of formulas to start off with. First up, AP Overmatch. Now you can see here on the screen, you take the armor value and you multiply that by 14.3. That's going to give you the calculation of what a given gun caliber can overmatch. So what does that mean? You can start off, we got a broadside ship here. We got a chance to bounce for most ships kicks in at about 45-degree angle. So if we're shooting a ship here, no chance to bounce. If the AP shell hits the side of the ship and it can penetrate the armor wherever it hits, it's going to go in and it's going to do something. We're not going to go over everything related to AP, but for overmatch purposes, once we get to 45-degree angle here, short, kind of like this, now the chance enters what's called a chance to bounce. So the game rolls the dice. If it could bounce off here, it could ricochet, or it might penetrate. And then when you get to 30 degrees, which is probably something like this, then it's no chance, or it's, automatic bounce at this point in time. So what happens then is if the AP caliber of the gun that's shooting this armor value is sufficient enough, it'll actually overmatch the armor and still penetrate the ship. So we take the 14.3 times the armor value. Let's take a look at this 25 millimeter front armor on the Megami here. So we do 25 times 14.3. Any gun that it comes out with 357.5. So any gun that's 358 millimeters or larger, if it strikes this surface, it doesn't matter if it's really well angled. It doesn't matter if it's a chance to bounce or no chance to bounce. The caliber is sufficient to overmatch that armor. It's going to go through and cause damage. It might overpen. It might do an internal detonation. Whatever the result is, that's a different part of the calculation. But for the armor, just looking specifically at the armor, that's what we're talking about. So again, you take 14.3 times the armor value. Usually you're talking about the front of the ship, if you're trying to angle like this, and then the shell hits the nose, it's either going to ricochet if it's below 357 degree caliber, or if it's higher than that, it's going to overmatch that armor, penetrate right through. The other formula we want to talk about, HE penetration. Now, in general, for most ships, what you do is you multiply the armor value times 0.6, or you take the gun caliber, divide by 6. Sorry, not 0.6. You take the armor times 6, or you take the gun caliber, divide by 6. But since we're looking at the armor view, we're going to say armor times 6. That's when the HE shells would penetrate. So on this ship, let's see, we take 25. I should be able to do the 150. I don't have to plug that one in. So any caliber gun that's over 150 millimeters, if it strikes this 25 millimeter portion of the ship, then it's going to, cause actual damage from the HE shell. If not, it's just going to shatter. You might still get fires, but it's not going to do raw damage. Special multipliers, the British battleships and German ships of all types at a certain tier, all of those, we're taking the armor times 4. So better penetration on the German ships, HE, and the British battleships. Of course, those are typically viewed as HE centric ships. The British battleships, Germans, it's an advantage they have. So again, you would take the 25 times 4 in this instance, and you would get anything over 100. Those HE shells for that category ships are going to be doing raw damage. Usually for the HE categories, we want to be looking at the deck, superstructure, that sort of thing. So those are kind of the formulas you need to know to understand how to do this. What do we how can we use armor view effectively? Basically, if you toggle the armor, you can see X on the lower left corner. That'll toggle it on and off. So let's say I want to take a look at the Citadel of this ship. Well, you might be saying, okay, can't really get a good look at the Citadel and the Megami. If we turn off these sections here, though, again, we're toggling X on PlayStation or whatever the equivalent button is on Xbox. Now we've isolated the Citadel. We can take a look here, and we can scroll through here. We got Citadel plating over there. We got the armored deck slopes. That's that slanted side there. You can see when we toggle that, 60 millimeters. The Antwerp ship, that's that horizontal part in the front of the Citadel deck. That's the top. Bottom's not going to really happen. Citadel armor belt, that's the side, so we can get those armor views. You know, it's just kind of useful to compare ship to ship. Okay, how strong is this Citadel armor protection from ship to ship? So if we want to isolate whatever, you know, you can, you know, just toggle these on and off like that if we want to look just at the superstructure, not highlighting anything else. But for me, this is most useful, turning these all off if you want to get a look at the Citadel like that. So let's take a look at a couple different ships. Here we got the Tier 3 Japanese cruiser Yubari, not necessarily known as the sturdiest ship known to man. Here we can take a look at the front plating on the nose. We got 10. How do we overmatch that? Well, pretty easy to do. We got 14.3 times 10. If I know my math, which I probably don't, but I think that's 143 caliber guns. So battleship guns, no problem. Potentially, you know, you got 203s on like the Furutaka Tier 4. Those are all overmatchers. So you can take a look at whatever ship you're playing, and if we have over 143 caliber guns, you can go to the stats page here, the artillery. Here we got 140 millimeter guns you can see on the main battery. So if we're looking just at the armor view, we can see that this ship can't overmatch its own front end because we got 140 calibers, we need 143. So if this ship is angled like this and another Yubari hits it and strikes it at the nose at that angle, automatically going to bounce. Now if we're at this 45-degree angle, chance to bounce, and if we're horizontal like this broadside and it hits us at this nose section, no chance to bounce. It's going to go in, it's going to cause damage, or potentially it'll be going through the ship without even detonating. But again, we're not going to get too heavily into the AP shells themselves. We got other videos covering that. If we want to look at the Citadel, we can isolate that here, and you can see if you bring the camera down to the waterline here, you can see the whole ship. I mean, not quite the whole ship, but from waterline to the top of the deck here, if you're striking the ship between the tower and looks like, you know, just past that rear turret there, that's all Citadel. So you're going to be getting a lot of Citadel shots when you're shooting the Yubari. We can take a look at the superstructure here. Looks like we got 7 millimeters, 10 millimeters. You know, we got a slightly more heavily armored pieces right there, but for most part, we're talking about 7 to 10. If we're taking 10 times 6, the standard HE shell, any gun that's over 60 millimeters, shooting this with HE, if it hits it in that section, going to be doing raw HE damage. Similarly, we can take a look at the side armor here, and you can see this thing's very susceptible to damage. So the Yubari, lightly armored, basically no armor. This thing, AP, HE, doesn't matter. Shoot this thing, it's going to have some problems surviving. We can compare that to something like the Bismarck, though, generally considered a more heavily armored target. And here, let's take a look at the front plating. We got the transformer guy in the front there. Front end, 32 millimeters. So if you do the math, 32 times 14.3, that's going to give you the gun caliber. Oops, 32 times 14.3, 457 millimeters. So any gun caliber that's lower than basically 457.6, if we're angled like this, it hits us at that highlighted orange front section, automatic bounce. And if you look up and down your ship's roster, really the Yamato is really the only thing. So that's when we're talking about angling ships, we're talking about basically pointing at them like this and hoping they're hitting these heavily armored parts of the ship. Likewise, for comparison's sake, if we want to look at the Citadel on the Bismarck, we can bring it down the waterline. You can see it's just barely above the waterline there. And then we can scroll, look at the different armor values of the Citadel deck. That's the top of the armor. And you can kind of scroll through there. So much more effective Citadel. But let's say we're in the Iowa. We got 406 caliber guns. Now, if we're shooting AP at this thing, and you divide 406 by 14.3, you come up with 28.4 basically. So anything that's 28 millimeters or less, that's what we're going to be able to strike reliably and overmatch with the AP. It doesn't really matter what angle we're coming at here. So let's take a look at the case made here. We got the deck, 50 millimeter deck. So that means if the shells are dropping straight down into this, we're not going to have any problems. Long range shots. But the more angled, the closer we get to these shooting for the deck, they're coming in at a flatter angle. So likewise, when we're talking about shooting at the nose, if it's pointing at you like this, it's going to be skipping off. Likewise, if we're shooting at the deck, the top of the ship there, imagine the shell coming in at kind of this angle, and that's still auto bounce territory, and now we're looking at that 50 millimeter armor. So the AP striking the deck, again, from the top, no problem. Once you get to that 45-degree angle, maybe something like this, now we're into the chance to bounce territory, and that's a dice roll, and then once it's flatter here, those shells are going to be less effective. How about Superstructure here? You can see here, 19. We got a couple heavily armored parts there, but for the most part, we can isolate it here just to get a better look at it. These armor values, we're not going to have a problem. So if the armor is angled, you can see all the different angles on this. This is like flat armor, basically. This is 45 degrees chance to bounce. If you're looking at those flat surfaces, obviously there's variations in the positions of the given armor depending on exactly what you're hitting. But it doesn't really matter. If we're doing the 19 times 14.3, the Iowa was able to really pen this superstructure at any angle. So that's kind of how you work this ship. Certain things are going to be more interesting. The casemate's basically the main section of armor here. You got kind of the side armor, the deck, and so forth. Of course, the nose section, that's going to be how we're angling primarily at ships close range. If they're hitting them in the hull there and we're in out of bounds territory, can the shell overmatch the armor or not? And of course, if you want to look at the Citadel, that's always interesting to keep an eye on as well. You can see exactly how big the Citadel is, how far it sticks up over the waterline, and what the armor values are. You can compare that to other ships and say, okay, this Citadel has really good armor. Certain Citadels have more armor than others. So anyway, that's kind of a rundown on the armor view. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you can actually use with this thing. If you want to go through and memorize every ship, then you're going to be like a scholar of the game. I don't have the time or the inclination to do that, but my kind of thinking is like if I'm playing a ship and I shoot it, and I'm thinking, okay, I can probably overmatch that nose, and it bounces. I want to go back after the game, check that ship's armor scheme and see, okay, was it just a fluke? Did I hit something odd? Or was I incorrect? Was I shooting at a part of the ship that I couldn't overmatch even though I thought it was? So hopefully that helps you guys out. That's going to do it for that one, though. If you did like the video, please hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We got lots of World of Warships coming all the time. Questions, comments, leave below. Love to hear from you guys. And see y'all later. Peace.